Internally displaced persons due to their first displacement are vulnerable to deprivation, displacement, and other protection risks, such as lack of access to basic services, separation, trafficking, discrimination, and several forms of abuse. Insurgency, famine, natural disasters are just few reasons people suddenly become displaced. In Nigeria, many have left their ancestral homes due to these reasons. To expedite actions for resettlement, efforts are being made. Now, Yobe State is the first state to domesticate the policy on IDPs. How will this policy be fully implemented? My guest, Sulaiman Dauda, who is the Project Coordinator Solutions for Internally Displaced Persons and Host Communities, who joins us via Zoom, will speak to us. Mr. Dauda, thank you so much for joining us on Insights.
Thank you very much. A pleasure.
Thank you so much. Okay, could you give us a brief on the state's policy on IDPs?
The state policy on internally displaced persons, it represents an ambitious policy initiated by Yobe State government under the leadership of His Excellency, the Executive Governor of Yobe State, Honorable Malabuni, whereby he envisioned a future whereby internally displaced persons will find a dignified, safe, and voluntary solution to their protracted displacement. This is also in connection with the United Nations Secretary General Action Agenda on Internal Displacement, which is intended to achieve through a return to ancestral home, local integration into host communities, or relocation of IDPs. And this process, state government felt state government is leading and driving this process, and the process is hoped to achieve through a consciously guided and controlled system. And that is the reason why the government of the state felt it is very important to initiate a policy. And this policy is not the only document.
Tell us, how would this foster reintegration, since your state, actually, we heard, does not have an IDP camp?
The IDP policy will give the Yobe State government a strategic direction in terms of the government intention and plans for the IDP. And then it's also help the government to align whether they want to locally integrate into host community or whether they want to relocate to a safe location. Alignment with the global best practices and standards. And then it's another very important aspect why the state government is conceiving this policy is the issue of displacement. It is beyond a crisis issue. It is now a development issue, because most of these internally displaced persons in Yobe State, they are more than 500,000. They are already, the infrastructure in some of these host communities that is currently residing within is overstretched. So government has to invest into this infrastructure, both in human capital development, like the health, the education, the water, the sanitation, etc. So these are things that the government has to invest it as part of the development agenda of the state to accommodate additional internally displaced persons into the host community. And for those that intend to return to their ancestral home, government must also invest in terms of providing them with shelter, in terms of with schools, in terms of providing them with education, in terms of providing them with livelihood, including security and safety of the IDP during and after they have been settled into their ancestral home. So these are some of the things that the Yobe State government looked at to come up with this very important policy, the first in the country to domesticate.
You know, several questions have been asked about this policy. How would this policy be sustained?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very, very good question. The need for the sustainability, it's what prompted the government to have a policy. The government is already providing all the services that is expected of her in terms of the humanitarian need of these communities. there is a need to pool resources from different sectors, both from national, from subnational, from the development partners, etc. And that is why it's very important to have a guide. And what are those guides? There are two important guides now available at the state. Number one is the action plan, and then number two is the policy. The policy has already been approved as a working document by the executive governor. So these are some of the sustainability mechanism that has been put in place. And this is beyond the life of any administration. Policies remains. When it is time to be reviewed, it will be reviewed within the government institutions. And these are part of the sustainability mechanism that is being put in place. And then also, most importantly, as part of its own commitment, has already pledged to support the internally displaced investment in the state with 5% of its state annual budget beginning from 2025 to 2027. So these are part of it. It has been already institutionalized within the state budget and economic planning system. And there is also a policy in place. There is also a framework in place. And then the government institutions their capacity will be built in. They will be sensitized. There will be awareness creation. So all these things are part of a sustainability mechanisms that the state government put in place to ensure that such a very strategic interventions are sustained for the benefit of the vulnerable group and for the benefit of the development plan of the state.
And that's the much we can take on the segment on the conversation on internally displaced persons management in Yobe State. We will bring you the concluding part of that conversation in our next episode. And that's where we draw the curtain on this episode of the program. We join at the same time next week for more on Insights. My name is Nnamdi Odipo. I'll see you then.